I'm Bonnie Williams, 68 years old, sitting at my kitchen table in Scottsdale, Arizona, with my good pearls on and my coffee going cold beside me. My son Kenneth is getting married tomorrow, and I'm buzzing like a teenager before prom. The dress is pressed, a soft blue I picked because he once told me it was his favorite color on me. The gift is wrapped, silver paper, cream bow. I even printed the little speech I planned to give at the reception. Nothing fancy, just a few words about how proud I was of him for finding someone who made him happy. I pick up my phone and call him, wanting to double-check the time I should arrive. He answers on the third ring. "Hey, Mom," he says, his voice low and a little stiff. "Hey yourself." I laugh. I just wanted to be sure what time I should get to the hotel tomorrow. The ceremony's at 4, right? There's a pause. Too long. "Kenneth, you there?" He breathes out slow, like he's bracing for something. "Mom, the wedding was last week." At first, I think I heard him wrong. "What did you say?" "The wedding," he repeats, quieter now. "It already happened. Last weekend." The words roll through the phone and slam into me. I look down at the invitation, lying open on the table. The neat black script says it plain as day, Saturday, June 12th, 4 p.m. tomorrow. Tomorrow. That can't be right, I say. "Your invitation says tomorrow." He clears his throat. There was a change of plans. Anita's parents wanted something smaller. We just decided to do it early. Real quiet. My hand starts to shake. "And you didn't tell me?" "It all happened fast, Mom. We figured you'd understand. You hate traveling on short notice." I laugh once, sharp and dry. "You think I'd miss my own son's wedding because of a flight schedule?" "Mom, please. It's done. We'll have pictures soon. And Anita wants to send you something nice." My chest tightens. "Pictures? That's supposed to make this okay." He's silent. I hear a woman's voice in the background. Anita's, saying something muffled. Then he says, "Look, I've got to go. I'll call you later, okay?" Before I can answer, the line goes dead. For a minute, I just sit there, staring at the phone, like it might explain what happened. The air in the kitchen feels heavy. The smell of starch from my freshly ironed dress turns sour in my nose. I pick up the invitation again, run my thumb over the raised lettering, and whisper the date out loud. Tomorrow. Not last week. Tomorrow. I walk to the mirror by the hallway and catch my reflection. Hair done, pearls shining, eyes bright with a joy that suddenly feels foolish. The tears come before I can stop them. I've been excited for months, planning every detail, telling everyone at church how handsome my Kenneth would look standing at the altar. I sit down on the couch, the one I bought for him when he first moved to Austin, and try to breathe. My mind runs through memories, birthdays, scraped knees, late-night talks when he was a teenager. I raised him alone after his father died. Every decision I made was about giving him a better life. And now he's married, and I wasn't even told. I grab the phone again, thinking maybe there's been some mix-up, maybe he meant a rehearsal, maybe he'll call back. But the phone stays quiet. I glance at the dress hanging on the closet door. The tag's still on, waiting for a moment that's already gone. The house feels too big, too still. I can hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick, and underneath it all, the soft sound of my own disbelief. I pick up the invitation one more time, fold it carefully, and set it back on the table. My hands stop trembling. That's when it hits me, this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. He didn't forget to call. He didn't lose my number. He didn't get caught up in wedding chaos. He decided. They both decided. And in that quiet, heavy moment, something inside me hardens just a little. I whisper to no one. I hadn't just lost an invitation. I'd lost my place in my own son's life. After I hung up that night, sleep never came. I sat by the window until the first bit of sunlight crept across the floor. Every memory of Kenneth felt like it belonged to someone else's life, one that had quietly ended without my notice. I couldn't stop asking myself how we had gotten here, from him once running into my arms after school to hanging up on me before his wedding. Kenneth was 10 when his father died. A heart attack, sudden and cruel. One minute we were planning a weekend at Lake Havasu, and the next I was a widow with a frightened boy clinging to my waist. There wasn't time to fall apart. The mortgage had to be paid, the bills stacked up, and the future still needed planning. I went back to work 2 weeks later at the small real estate office in Scottsdale where I'd been part-time. My boss asked if I was sure I was ready, and I told him I don't have a choice. I started taking extra listings, hosting open houses every weekend. I learned to smile even when I was running on coffee and 3 hours of sleep. Kenneth used to do his homework at the office sometimes, sitting quietly in the corner with his comic books while I filled out contracts. I'd look over at him and feel a mix of pride and guilt. Pride for how well he handled everything, guilt for not being home more. He never complained, just watched and learned. When I sold my first $1 million home, he surprised me with a cupcake from the bakery near our house. "For you, Mom," he said. "You earned it." He was 11. We were a team back then. When the AC broke, we fixed it together. When money was tight, he didn't ask for extras. I kept telling him he could be anything he wanted. He used to joke that he'd grow up rich enough to buy me a beach house one day. I'd laugh and tell him I'd settle for a visit once in a while. He was smart, steady, the kind of kid teachers remembered. I worked hard to keep him in good schools. When it came time for college, he got into the University of Texas in Austin, and though I smiled through the whole move, my chest felt hollow when I drove home alone. I helped him with the deposit for his first apartment, bought him a used car, and sent care packages when he ran short. I wanted him to have everything I didn't. Those were good years, even from afar. We talked often, though I noticed small shifts, shorter calls, fewer updates. He was busy, he said. New city, new job after graduation. I understood. Kids grow, life changes. Still, I thought the bond between us was solid, the kind that holds no matter how far life takes you. Then came Anita. He called me one evening, voice excited. "Mom, I want you to meet someone," he said. "She's incredible." When I met her, I could see why he was taken. She was sharp, stylish, confident, a marketing consultant from San Diego. She shook my hand politely, complimented my necklace, and asked a few questions about Scottsdale real estate. Everything about her felt practiced, like she knew how to make the right impression. Over dinner, she talked about her parents, her father, a retired surgeon, and her mother, who hosted charity events. They lived near the water, of course. I listened, smiling, but something about her tone made me feel like a guest in a conversation I wasn't meant to join. After that first meeting, things changed. Kenneth called less often. When I did hear from him, Anita was always busy with work or resting. They moved in together in a townhouse I helped him find. I offered to come down and help decorate, but he told me Anita had it handled. "You've done enough, Mom," he said kindly, but it felt like a door closing. When they got engaged, I found out through a group text with cousins. He called the next day, apologetic, blaming a hectic week. I told him I understood. He sounded relieved, and I hung up wondering why forgiveness felt so lonely. I tried to connect with Anita, sent her a birthday card with a gift certificate to a spa near their house. She texted, "Thank you, Bonnie, very thoughtful," and that was it. No call, no visit. I sent a few messages here and there, recipes, photos from trips, small attempts to stay connected. Most went unanswered. When they came home for Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I cooked for days, roast turkey, pecan pie, all his favorites. They stayed just long enough to eat. then left early to visit Anita's parents. I stood at the sink washing dishes, watching taillights disappear, telling myself they were just busy. The distance grew quietly, the way cracks spread under paint. No fights, no harsh words, just less of everything. Less time, less warmth, less being needed. When Kenneth told me he'd bought a condo in Austin as an investment, I was proud. He said he might rent it out for a while, maybe live there later. He needed help with the down payment, and I didn't hesitate. "Of course, honey," I said. "We'll do it together." My name went on the papers too, though I didn't think much of it at the time. He promised he'd handle everything. Looking back, maybe that was when our roles shifted. I stopped being his safe place and became his safety net. Every time he stumbled, I helped. Every time I asked to visit, there was an excuse. When he and Anita set the wedding date, I thought it was my chance to be part of his world again. I bought a dress, booked a flight, even practiced my speech. I imagined sitting in the front row, watching him smile at his bride. And yet here I was, the night before what I thought was the wedding, sitting in silence, realizing I'd been living in the past. I kept seeing his 10-year-old face, that sweet boy who promised he'd always take care of me someday. Maybe that boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as a memory he didn't know what to do with. I took a deep breath, trying not to cry again. My phone buzzed with a message, a photo of Kenneth and Anita on their honeymoon. Her caption read, "Just married, the happiest week of our lives." I stared at the picture, at the smile I used to know. Then I turned off my phone and whispered to the empty room, maybe I loved him more than he ever needed me. The morning after that sleepless night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the desert yard that suddenly felt foreign to me. The saguaros stood still, silent witnesses to what I didn't want to face. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. I kept turning it over in my mind. How does a mother get left out of her only child's wedding without so much as a warning? It wasn't sudden. I realized it had been happening slowly, quietly for years. It started small. When Kenneth and Anita got engaged, I wasn't there for the proposal. He sent me a photo of the ring and a text that said, "She said yes." No call, no visit, just that picture. I called right away, thrilled, and he sounded distracted, like he was in the middle of something. I offered to host an engagement dinner at my place, maybe invite a few close friends and family. He hesitated, then said Anita's parents were already planning something. "They want to keep it local," he said. "Less travel for everyone." Everyone but me. A week later, I saw photos online. Anita's parents had thrown a lavish dinner in San Diego. String lights, champagne glasses, a long table by the ocean. My son was there in a tailored suit, smiling beside her, his arm around her shoulders. I wasn't tagged. My name wasn't mentioned. That stung, but I told myself not to take it personally. I thought, they're busy, it's her family's event. But a quiet ache settled in that didn't leave. Then came the wedding plans. Kenneth called to tell me they'd found a venue, a vineyard outside of Napa. He sounded so proud. "You'll love it, Mom," he said. "It's beautiful." I started to ask questions, what date, what hotel, how I could help, but he kept saying Anita and her mother were handling everything. I offered to pay for the flowers or the cake, maybe the photographer. He thanked me, said they had it covered. A few weeks later, he called again, voice low, saying the venue deposit was a little more than they'd expected. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "We'll figure it out." I knew that tone. It was the same one he used in college, when he didn't want to ask for help but needed it anyway. I wired him the money the next day, no questions asked. A month later, Anita's father called to thank me for my thoughtful contribution. His tone was polite but distant, like I was an investor, not family. He mentioned something about helping the kids get on their feet and making things easier That conversation stayed with me for a long time. I wasn't asked about the guest list, even though I knew most of Kenneth's side of the family better than he did. Cousins I hadn't seen in years started posting that they were invited. Some even called me to say how excited they were to see me there. I smiled and pretended I knew what was going on. Inside, I felt invisible. When the wedding website went up, my name wasn't on it anywhere. Anita's parents had their bios listed, proudly welcoming guests to celebrate their daughter's marriage. Kenneth's section just said, "With love and support from family and friends." That phrase covered everyone, but didn't name anyone. It was clean, neutral, and cold. I remember calling him once to ask if I could help with the rehearsal dinner. He said, "Mom, it's going to be really small. We don't want too much family pressure." I asked what that meant. He hesitated, then said, "Anita just wants it simple." That word, simple, became a shield he hid behind. Simple meant I wasn't needed. Simple meant stay home. Then came the bridal shower. I didn't expect to be invited, but a mutual friend sent me a picture from it. Anita surrounded by smiling women, gifts piled high, a sash across her chest that read "Future Mrs. Harper." My son's name, Kenneth Harper, written on everything, and yet not a single sign that I existed. I kept telling myself they were just trying to avoid stress. But as the months passed, the pattern was clear. I wasn't in the photos. I wasn't on the email chains. I wasn't even asked about his tuxedo. Every time I offered help, they said, "We've got it." Every time I asked a question, they said, "Don't worry." The only time Kenneth reached out was about money. A catering deposit, a last-minute license fee, something always came up. I paid without hesitation. He'd always been responsible, so I thought maybe the costs just got away from them. I never realized I was being used to keep things running smoothly while being kept at arm's length. When I did talk to Anita, she was polite, but her words had edges. She'd call me Bonnie instead of Mom, even after they got engaged. Once, when I asked if I could host them for a small dinner to meet a few of my friends, she said, "Oh, that might be a little much for Kenneth right now. He's so busy." I remember staring at the phone, wondering when my own son needed someone's permission to see me. As the wedding date approached, I felt the distance growing like a fog. Calls were short. Texts came late. I convinced myself it was just wedding stress. I picked out a beautiful pearl necklace as a gift for Anita, something simple and classic. I even paid extra for engraving. "Welcome to the family." I never got to give it to her. Now, sitting in my quiet kitchen, I can see it so clearly. The wedding wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor communication or bad timing. It was a message, one they'd been sending for years, and I'd chosen not to hear. Looking back, I see how carefully it was done. No fights, no dramatic words, just small exclusions that added up until there was no space left for me. I was still useful. The checkbook that opened when needed, the cheerful voice that said, "It's okay, I understand." But they didn't want me in the picture, literally and figuratively. As that truth sank in, the ache inside me shifted into something sharper. I wasn't angry yet. I was just done pretending it was all accidental. For the first time, I let myself see it without excuses, without softening the edges. I whispered it out loud, the way you say something final to make it real. Looking back, the wedding wasn't a mistake. It was a message, and I just hadn't wanted to read it. 2 days passed after the call, but the silence from Kenneth felt heavier with each hour. I went through my normal motions, watered the plants, folded laundry, checked the mail, but I wasn't really there. Every little sound reminded me of what had happened. The quiet between us was louder than anything. That Monday morning, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered, a familiar voice came through. "Bonnie, it's Rita." Rita Donovan had been my neighbor for nearly 20 years before she moved to Denver to live closer to her daughter. We'd stayed close, calling every few weeks, trading recipes, updates, and gossip about people we used to work with. But this time, her tone was different, careful, hesitant. "Bonnie, I hate to bring this up, but I saw something online today about Kenneth." I froze. "What do you mean?" There was a post from one of his friends, wedding photos. Looked like a vineyard in Napa. Beautiful place. My heart dropped. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she said quietly. Kenneth and Anita, arm in arm. Her dress was simple, elegant. His parents-in-law were in the front row. "You weren't there, were you?" I sank into my chair. "No, Rita, I wasn't." She hesitated again. "I thought maybe you decided not to go." But the post said, "An intimate ceremony surrounded by family." The word family cut deep. I bit my lip so hard it hurt. I didn't even know it was happening. I said, Rita sighed softly. "Oh, Bonnie." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I stared at the framed photo on my wall, Kenneth at his college graduation, my arm around him, both of us grinning. I'd been so proud that day, and now he'd built a new life where I wasn't even invited to stand in the background. Rita spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "I don't think they forgot you, Bonnie. They didn't want you there." I closed my eyes. Why would my own son do that? "I can't answer that," she said, "but I've seen it before. Sometimes people marry into families that make them feel they have to prove something. They think distance gives them control." The truth in her words stung. I'd seen it happen to other women in my church group. Mothers left out, ignored once their children married. But I never thought it would happen to me. Kenneth had always been kind, thoughtful. I raised him to respect people, to stand by family. How had that boy turned into this man? Rita let the silence stretch, giving me space to breathe. Then she said softly, "You deserve better than how they treated you." That broke something in me. I had held my tears for days, but they came fast now, warm on my cheeks. I tried to hide it in my voice. "It's embarrassing, Rita. Everyone I know knew about that wedding, but me." "Don't you dare feel ashamed," she said. "You did nothing wrong." I wiped my face with a napkin from the table. "I just don't understand. I helped him so much. When he needed money for college, when he bought that condo, when he was trying to start his business. I thought we were close." "You were," she said gently. "You just cared more than they did. That's not your fault." Her words landed heavy, but true. I realized I'd spent so many years giving, believing it was love holding us together. But maybe what I thought was closeness was really convenience. For him, we talked a few minutes longer. She offered to come visit, but I told her no. I needed time to think. Before hanging up, she said one last thing. "Bonnie, you can't change what they did, but you can decide how much space they get in your heart from now on." When I ended the call, I sat for a long time in silence. The hurt had layers: shock, humiliation, grief. Beneath it, though, something else started to form. It wasn't hate. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I walked through the house, touching the things I'd collected over the years, the photo albums, the travel souvenirs Kenneth used to tease me about, the set of dishes I bought for when the family grows. All of it had been built around an idea of family that apparently existed only in my head. I remembered the day Kenneth told me he and Anita were buying that condo in Austin. I had been so proud, thinking it meant stability. I helped him get approved for the loan, even signed my name beside his. I told myself it was a gift, something to help him start strong. I never saw it as power or leverage, but now, as I stood in my kitchen replaying Rita's words, I realized it was one of the few ties left between us that still had my name on it. I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked out the window. My backyard was quiet, no laughter, No footsteps, just the faint sound of a lawnmower down the street. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's mother or someone's helper. I just felt like me, standing at the edge of something ending. Rita's voice echoed in my mind. They didn't forget you. They didn't want you there. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a scheduling mistake or a misunderstanding. It was intentional. That realization settled deep, cold but clean. There was a strange comfort in knowing the truth, even when it hurt. I sat back down and whispered to myself, if that's how they see me, maybe it's time I start seeing them clearly too. And just like that, the ache in my chest turned into resolve. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew I'd never let them decide my worth again. Hearing the truth from Rita, that they did it on purpose, was a turning point. If you believe a mother's years of sacrifice deserve respect, please share this story. Let's make sure this kind of quiet cruelty is brought into the light. And if you think a child has the right to erase their own mother, then I truly want to hear your reasoning in the comments below. That evening, after Rita's call, I sat in my living room surrounded by silence. The kind of silence that feels thick like the air has weight. The truth was now plain. I had been written out of my own family. The grief came in waves, but beneath it, something else was stirring, a need to understand where I stood. I couldn't change what Kenneth had done, but I could at least see clearly what I had left. I pulled out an old folder from my desk drawer, the one I labeled Kenneth, Important Papers. I hadn't looked at it in years. Inside were copies of checks, loan statements, and documents I'd signed for him over time. Seeing it all laid out like that made me realize just how much of my life I'd invested in his. There was the tuition agreement from college. I'd co-sign that loan. The insurance policy I helped him get when he bought his first car. The wire transfers from when his business had a slow quarter. And there, near the bottom of the pile, was the paperwork for the Austin condo. I remembered that day as clearly as if it had happened last week. Kenneth had called, voice bubbling with excitement. Mom, it's a great investment. 2 bedrooms, good neighborhood. I can rent it out until Anita and I decide to settle down. I was so proud. He'd come so far, and I wanted to help him feel secure. The bank had required a co-signer because he didn't yet have the credit history for a second property, so I agreed without hesitation. This will be for your future, I told him as we signed the papers together at the notary's office. When the agent slid the deed across the table, she pointed to both our names. Ownership split 60-40, she said. Mrs. Williams, you're the majority owner until the mortgage is refinanced. I had barely listened. It felt like just a formality, something to make the bank happy. I never thought that detail would matter. But as I looked at the papers now, I saw it differently. I had given and given emotionally, financially, but I had never realized that some part of it had left a paper trail. My name wasn't just a signature on old forms. It was proof. I opened my laptop and logged into the mortgage portal, something I hadn't done in years. My name popped up again and again as guarantor, co-owner, primary contact. My hand trembled slightly on the mouse. It wasn't just his property. It was mine too. That realization hit like a jolt. For years, I had felt powerless, like everything between us was out of my control. But here in black and white was something concrete. I hadn't meant it to be leverage, but it was. I called my insurance agent next, curious how much else I was still attached to. The woman on the line confirmed it quickly. Yes, Ms. Williams, your policy still covers Kenneth's vehicle. You've been paying the supplemental premium each month. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. I hadn't even realized that was still active. I'd been automatically paying bills that tied me to a son who no longer even called me. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. I wasn't just left out of a wedding. I was still funding part of their life while being erased from it. The anger that rose inside me wasn't wild. It was calm, sharp, and steady. I thought about calling Kenneth right then, but what could I say? That I finally saw what he'd done? That I was tired of being useful but unwanted? No, talking wouldn't change a thing. I needed clarity, not confrontation. That's when I thought of Martin Lowe. Martin and I went way back. We met at a networking lunch years ago when I was still selling houses. He'd been my go-to lawyer for real estate contracts ever since. Honest, patient, the kind of man who never raised his voice but always got results. I scrolled through my contacts and called his office. To my surprise, he picked up himself. "Bonnie, it's been too long," he said warmly. "What can I do for you?" I hesitated, then told him everything, not the personal details, just the facts. The Austin condo, the insurance, the shared accounts. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you still have the title documents?" "I do," I said. "I'm looking right at them." "Good," he replied. "Send me copies. From what you're describing, you still own 60% of that property. Legally, it's yours until it's refinanced or sold with your consent. He can't make any major decisions without your approval." I felt my pulse pick up. "So I could, in theory, sell my share?" "Not just in theory," he said. "You have full authority over it, assuming you're still listed as majority owner. I can confirm once I review the file." I sent the documents over right away. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. "You're correct," Martin said. "You're still the primary owner. He may be making the mortgage payments, but he can't move, rent, or refinance without your permission." I sat back in silence, the weight of that information settling in. For so long, I'd felt like everything I gave him was gone, like there was nothing left to hold on to. But suddenly, I realized that wasn't true. "Thank you, Martin," I said quietly. "Of course." "And Bonnie," he added gently, "I know this isn't just about money, but remember, ownership is power. Don't give it away again." After we hung up, I stayed on the couch, thinking. The condo wasn't just a property. It was a symbol, a piece of me that hadn't been erased. Kenneth might have shut me out of his wedding, but he couldn't shut me out of that. I pulled the papers into a neat pile and put them back in the folder, but this time it didn't feel like a stack of memories. It felt like a plan. For the first time since that phone call, I felt steady. I wasn't helpless anymore. I wasn't just the mother left behind. I had something that mattered, something that gave me a choice. I took a deep breath, looked at the name Bonnie Williams printed next to his on the deed, and felt something shift inside me. For years, I gave him freedom. Now, I held the key to it. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calmness. The kind that comes when you've cried everything out, and what's left is quiet determination. I made my coffee, took a shower, and dressed in a simple navy blouse and slacks. Then I grabbed the folder from my desk, the one Martin had looked over the day before, and headed into town. His office was in a modest building downtown, just off Camelback Road. The front desk clerk smiled and waved me back when she saw me. Martin came out of his office, adjusting his glasses with that same patient expression he'd worn for as long as I'd known him. "Bonnie," he said, shaking my hand, "come in. I looked over everything again last night. You've got a clear case." I sat across from his desk, setting the folder down in front of me. "Tell me exactly what we're looking at." He opened the folder and flipped through the papers. "Between the down payment you made, the ongoing insurance premiums, and those 2 loan transfers that went to Kenneth's business account, he owes you roughly $78,000. He looked up at me over his glasses. "That's not counting the 60% ownership you hold in the Austin condo. That property's appreciated since you bought it. It's now worth close to $400,000. I nodded slowly. The numbers didn't surprise me. I'd known I'd helped him more than once, but seeing the totals in writing made it real. And he hasn't paid any of that back, I said. No, ma'am, Martin replied. Not a dime. Legally, you could send a formal demand letter and require repayment within 30 days. Or, he continued carefully, we can give him the option to buy out your share of the condo. That would settle most of it cleanly. He leaned back, waiting for my answer. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My eyes went to the window behind him, where the Arizona sunlight cut sharp lines across the blinds. I thought about Kenneth's wedding, the one I wasn't told about. The phone call where he said it was already over, like it was nothing. The photos I'd seen online, him smiling next to Anita's parents, their hands linked, everyone looking happy and complete. Except me. I thought about every time I'd said, it's fine, don't worry about it. Every check I'd written, without asking, when I'd see it back. Every moment I'd swallowed my pride to make his life easier. Martin was still watching me, waiting. Bonnie, he said gently, you don't have to make a decision right now. We can send a letter, open a conversation. That way it stays civil. I looked him straight in the eye. No. He blinked. No. No chances, I said firmly. Put the Austin property on the market immediately. Sell my share. Use the proceeds to pay off what he owes me. And whatever's left after that, send him a check. Martin set down his pen. You want to sell without offering him first refusal? Yes. He hesitated. You understand this could cause real fallout. Once that property hits the market, he'll know you're serious. It might sever whatever's left between you. I leaned forward. He already did that, Martin, when he stood at that altar and pretended I didn't exist. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll start the process. We'll need to notify the lender and list your share formally. It may get messy, but it's within your rights. That's fine, I said quietly. I'm done being the reasonable one. He gave a small sigh, scribbled a few notes, and said, You're sure? I'm sure, I replied. He shut me out of his biggest day. I'm shutting him out of mine. As he typed up the preliminary paperwork, I watched his hands move across the keyboard. My decision felt heavy, but right. For years, I had let love excuse everything, disrespect, distance, even humiliation. Now, love looked different. It looked like protecting myself from further harm. When he slid the first form across the desk, I signed without hesitation. My name flowed across the paper in steady ink. No shaking, no second-guessing. Martin looked up as I finished. You've just taken back control, Bonnie. Not many people your age would do that. I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just tired of waiting for someone else to do right by me. We went over the final steps, property valuation, listing agreement, how the funds would be distributed once the sale closed. He said he'd draft a letter for Kenneth informing him of my intent to sell. I told him not to bother. He'll find out when the listing goes up, I said. That's enough notice for someone who never gave me any. On my way out, I felt the warmth of the afternoon sun on my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, my breathing felt even. My heart didn't race. It was as if all the emotion that had weighed me down had settled into something solid. Not anger, not revenge, just certainty. Driving home, I thought about what people might say if they knew. Some would call it cruel. Others would call it fair. Maybe both were true. But I wasn't doing this to hurt him. I was doing it because I'd spent my whole life fixing problems that weren't mine to fix. And I was finally done. When I pulled into my driveway, the desert light had turned soft. I carried the empty folder inside and placed it neatly back in the drawer. Then I made myself tea and sat by the window watching the sun slip behind the mountains. It wasn't satisfaction. I felt more like release. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the mother cleaning up after someone else's choices. I looked down at my hands, still steady from signing those papers, and said out loud to the quiet house, for once, I wasn't the mother fixing things. I was the woman finishing them. It took only 4 days for the listing to go live. The condo in Austin hit the market on a Thursday morning, and by noon, the calls started. 2 offers came in before the weekend. Martin texted me the details, and I gave him my approval to move forward. It was quick, clean, and professional, just business. But I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. By Saturday afternoon, the knock on my door came hard enough to rattle the glass. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. I opened it anyway. Kenneth stood on the porch, face flushed with anger. Anita hovered a few steps behind him, her expression tight. He didn't even say hello. "You sold my condo without asking?" he shouted. I didn't flinch. "I sold my share," I said evenly. "You asked me for nothing, Kenneth. I returned the favor." He blinked, thrown off for a moment by how calm I was. Then his voice rose again. "That was a joint investment. You had no right." "Actually, I did," I interrupted. "You'd know that if you'd read the paperwork you asked me to sign all those years ago. My name wasn't for decoration." Anita stepped forward, her tone softer, rehearsed. "Bonnie, we didn't mean for this to turn into a fight. There's been a lot of confusion. Kenneth thought you'd wait." I turned to her. "Wait for what?" "A phone call that never comes. An invitation that never arrived. I'd been waiting for years. Anita." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Kenneth ran a hand through his hair, pacing near the doorway. "Mom, you could have talked to me first. This is our future you're messing with." "Your future?" I said quietly. "The one I paid for, the one I co-signed, funded, insured, and never saw a penny back from." He froze, guilt flickering across his face before frustration took over again. "That's not fair," he said. "You said it was to help me." "And I did help you," I said, still calm. "I helped you build something solid. I gave you opportunities one never had. But you used my help as if it came with no limits, no respect. That's not help anymore. That's taking advantage." Anita touched his arm, trying to soothe him. "Kenneth, maybe let's sit and talk." I shook my head. "There's nothing to sit about. It's done. The sale's in progress. Once it closes, the debt is cleared. You'll get whatever's left, and I'll be out of your hair." He looked at me in disbelief. "You'd really do that to your own son?" I met his eyes. "You did worse to your own mother." The words hung heavy in the air. Anita looked down. Kenneth's jaw clenched. I could see the storm building in him, but I stayed where I was, steady. He took a step closer, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "Mom, come on. We just wanted to handle things our way. Anita's parents." "This isn't about her parents," I said. "It's about respect. You didn't just cut me out of your wedding. You made it clear that I don't belong in your life unless it's convenient. I'm just making sure that finally works both ways." Anita's eyes welled up. "That's not true. Kenneth loves you. He really does. We both do. Things just got complicated." I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. "Love doesn't get that complicated. You don't forget to invite someone you love to the most important day of your life. You don't call them after the fact like it's a business update." Kenneth threw up his hands. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but that's what happens when silence stretches long enough. The only way to be heard is to make noise." He shook his head. "I can't believe you'd sell that place. You could have called me." I kept my tone steady. "You taught me that silence is an answer." That stopped him cold. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked away, exhaling hard. Anita turned toward me, tears in her eyes. "Bonnie, please." He's just upset. We can fix this. We can make things right. I felt a flicker of sadness, not anger. It's not something you fix with words. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Anita. I'm doing this because I finally understand where I stand. I won't be treated like an option anymore. Kenneth's shoulders tensed. So that's it? You just cut us off? You think that makes you the bigger person? I think it makes me free, I said quietly. He stared at me, his expression shifting between frustration and disbelief. Then he turned abruptly toward the door. Let's go, he muttered to Anita. She hesitated, eyes flicking between us. Kenneth, maybe we should. Now, he said sharply. She looked back at me one last time. I'm sorry, Bonnie, she whispered. I nodded once. Take care of yourself, Anita. The door closed behind them with a final thud. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the space where they'd just stood. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel heavy this time. It felt clean, almost peaceful. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the table. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel regret, only relief, the kind that comes when you've finally said what needed to be said. Through the window, the late afternoon sun spread across the yard, soft and golden. I thought about the woman I'd been all these years, the fixer, the one who always smoothed things over, made peace, filled silence with comfort. That woman had been kind, but she'd also been afraid of losing love if she ever stood her ground. Now I understood something simple and powerful. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiving too quickly. It comes from letting things fall where they belong. For the first time, I didn't rush to call anyone or explain myself. I didn't rehearse what I should have said or wonder what would happen next. I just sat there, letting the quiet settle around me. Kenneth's anger didn't change the truth. The property would sell. The debt would be settled. And my heart, finally, would stop carrying the weight of pretending everything was fine. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and thought, he'll be angry for a while, maybe forever. But that wasn't my burden anymore. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft streaks of orange. I watched it fade and whispered, almost to myself, I didn't lose him today. I let him go. And with that, the house, for the first time in years, finally felt like mine again. Walking away from that confrontation, I knew I had finally drawn the line. It's a hard thing to do, and I know not everyone has the strength for it. If you believe a woman has the right to stand up for herself, even against her own son, hit that like button to show your support. And for those who think I went too far and should have just forgiven and forgotten, I'm listening. Tell me what you would have done. The sale went through faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, the Austin condo was off the market and closed. Martin handled everything efficiently, sending me updates every few days. The buyer was a young couple relocating from Seattle, eager to move in right away. When the final papers arrived for me to sign, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and read every line slowly. Once my pen hit the page, I knew there was no turning back. The funds transferred to my account 2 days later. From that total, Martin deducted Kenneth's outstanding debts, the loans, the insurance premiums, and a few lingering payments I'd covered over the years. What remained wasn't much. Martin sent Kenneth a check for the balance and a letter summarizing the settlement. It was clean, fair, and final. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but when the money hit my account, I mostly felt tired. It wasn't the kind of victory you celebrate. It was quiet, like finishing a long job you never wanted in the first place. A few days later, word began to spread. Scottsdale isn't a small town when it comes to gossip. At the grocery store, people I barely knew stopped mid-aisle when they saw me. A woman from church whispered to another as I passed by, I heard phrases like that mother who sold her son's house, and she didn't even warn him. Some looked at me with curiosity, others with judgment. I kept my head high and smiled politely, even when it stung. I knew how stories worked. People only heard the part that shocked them, not the years that led up to it. A week later, I met Rita for lunch at a small cafe near her daughter's place. She'd driven down from Denver to check on me. When she walked in, her familiar warmth made me exhale for the first time in days. "Bonnie," she said, hugging me tightly, "you look better than I expected." "I'm getting there," I said, managing a small smile. We ordered salads, and for a while we talked about ordinary things, her grandchildren, my garden, the weather. But I knew what was coming. Finally, she leaned forward. "I heard about the condo," she said carefully. I nodded. "I figured you would." "I'm not judging," she added quickly. "You had every right to do it. I just wanted to ask how you feel about it." I stirred the lemon in my water, watching the slice spin. "I feel relieved," I said truthfully, "and guilty, both at the same time." Rita tilted her head. "Do you think it went too far?" Her question hung between us like heavy air. I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I finally said. "Some days, it feels like I stood up for myself for the first time in years. Other days, I wonder if I turned into the kind of person I never wanted to be." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You didn't turn into anyone. You just stopped being invisible." That comforted me, though the ache inside didn't fully fade. I knew she meant well, but part of me couldn't stop replaying Kenneth's face at my door. The disbelief, the anger. I'd spent a lifetime teaching him responsibility and compassion. Had I just undone all of that with one decision? After lunch, I went home and sat out on the patio. The sun was low, the desert light soft and gold. The quiet should have felt peaceful, but my mind wouldn't rest. I imagined what Kenneth must be saying to people. Probably that I blindsided him, that I humiliated him. And maybe I had, at least in his eyes. But I also knew this. He had been fine watching me fade into the background of his life. He hadn't thought twice about leaving me out of the wedding or about the lies that followed. It was easy for him to dismiss me when I never demanded anything. That's what this was really about. For once, I had forced him to see that my choices mattered too. Still, the weight of what I'd done lingered. There were moments at night when I lay awake wondering if he'd ever forgive me. Then I'd think of the phone call that started it all. "Mom, the wedding was last week," and the guilt would dull again. A few of my church friends reached out after hearing the gossip. Most were kind. The one woman, Nancy, said gently, "Bonnie, I can't imagine doing that to my son." I smiled and replied, I couldn't imagine being left out of his wedding either. She didn't have much to say after that. I learned something about people through all this. Everyone has an opinion when they haven't lived your pain. One evening, as I was watering the plants, my phone buzzed. A message from Kenneth. I hesitated before opening it. It said, "I got your lawyer's letter and the check. I hope you're satisfied." No hello, no love, no question. Just that. I stared at the screen for a while before replying, "I hope you learn what satisfaction really means someday." Then I deleted the thread. The next day, Rita called to check in again. "You doing okay today?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. "People can say what they want. I'm not angry anymore." "You sound strong," she said. "I'm getting there," I replied. But it's strange, Rita, when you finally draw a line, people don't look at the years you spent being walked over. They only notice the moment you stop. She sighed softly. That's true, but sometimes that moment changes everything. I looked out the window and nodded. It already has. We talked a bit longer, and after we hung up, I sat with my thoughts. I didn't know if I'd ever see Kenneth again. Maybe someday he'd understand why I did it. Maybe he never would. But either way, I'd done what I needed to do to protect what little self-respect I had left. The money from the sale wasn't what mattered. It was the act itself, proof that I could still stand on my own 2 feet. People kept whispering, but I stopped caring. I'd lived long enough to know that peace doesn't come from other people's approval. It comes from knowing you finally told the truth, not just to them, but to yourself. That night, I sat outside again, watching the sun dip below the mountains. The air cooled, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. The decision might have divided people, but it was mine. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the quiet settle around me, and said softly, more to myself than anyone else, justice doesn't always look kind. Sometimes it just looks necessary. 3 months passed before life started to feel steady again. The Arizona heat had given way to the kind of dry autumn that makes you realize time is moving on whether you're ready or not. I woke up one morning, looked around my big empty house, and knew it was time to let it go. The place had served its purpose. It had been where Kenneth took his first steps, where I built my career, and where I'd waited too long for phone calls that never came. But now the rooms just echoed. I didn't need that much space anymore. I needed peace. So I sold it. The realtor was surprised when I told her I wanted a quick sale. "You're not even going to look for another place here?" she asked. "No," I said. "I think I've lived enough chapters in this town." A month later, I moved to Santa Barbara. I'd always loved the California coast, calm water, good weather, and just enough distance from the past. I found a small 2-bedroom cottage a few blocks from the ocean. Nothing fancy, but the kind of place where mornings felt easy. The first night there, I opened the windows and listened to the waves in the distance. It wasn't silence anymore. It was peace. I started volunteering at a housing nonprofit downtown. They helped young women learn about budgeting, credit, and buying their first homes. I wasn't sure I had much to offer at first, but it turned out all those years in real estate came in handy. Most of the women were in their 20s, smart, determined, and often scared. I saw pieces of my younger self in them. One afternoon, after a class, a girl named Leah lingered behind. She looked nervous. "Ms. Williams," she said, "you talk about being independent like it's easy, but it sounds lonely sometimes." I smiled. "It can be, but lonely and peaceful aren't the same thing. When you build your own life, you get to decide who gets to be part of it." She nodded like she understood, even if she didn't yet. Working there gave me something I didn't realize I'd lost: purpose. Every day I left that office knowing I'd helped someone avoid the mistakes I'd made. It felt good to pour my energy into something that gave back, instead of always giving away. Occasionally, Kenneth would cross my mind. Not in anger, just in passing. I wondered if he and Anita were doing well, if they'd bought another property, if they ever talked about me. I didn't check their social media or ask around. I told myself if they wanted to reach me, they knew how. One chilly morning in December, I went to my mailbox and found a stack of envelopes and one small package. The handwriting on the envelope stopped me cold. It was Kenneth's. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at it. My first thought was to set it aside, maybe even throw it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. I went inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened it carefully. Inside was a holiday card. On the front, a picture of a smiling couple on a beach, Kenneth and Anita, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. At the bottom, the caption read, "Our first Christmas as a family." My breath caught for a moment. I studied the baby's face, soft round cheeks, Kenneth's dark eyes. My grandchild, a little person I didn't even know existed until that moment. The back of the card had a short note in Kenneth's handwriting. "Hope you're doing well, Mom." We're happy and healthy. Maybe we can talk sometime. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a sentence that sat somewhere between olive branch and obligation. I traced my finger over the photo, not sure what I felt. There was a time when this would have shattered me, realizing I'd missed another life milestone. But now it didn't break me. It just hurt quietly, like pressing on an old scar. I set the card down and stared out the window at the ocean. The water was calm, the waves small and steady. I thought about calling him, writing him back, demanding answers. But what would that change? He was living his life, and I was finally living mine. Instead, I walked to my desk, took out a blank card, and wrote a single line. I hope your home is full of laughter. No guilt, no bitterness, just truth. I sealed it, stamped it, and dropped it in the mailbox on my afternoon walk. That night, I made dinner, grilled salmon and a small salad, and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat by the window with the ocean breeze drifting in and realized I felt something I hadn't in a long time, contentment. I still didn't know if I'd gone too far by selling that condo. Maybe I had, maybe I hadn't, but life isn't about always being right. Sometimes it's just about surviving what happens and finding peace in the aftermath. Every now and then, I imagined Kenneth opening my card, reading that simple line, and wondering if I was angry or forgiving. The truth was, I was both, and neither. I had stopped trying to untangle those emotions. The next morning, I went to volunteer again. Leah greeted me with a smile. "Morning, Ms. Williams. You look happy today." "I am," I said. "I really am." As the day went on, I caught myself thinking how strange life is. We spend so much of it trying to be everything for someone else. And when they let us down, we think it means we've failed. But sometimes it just means it's time to start over. That evening, I walked along the shore barefoot. The sand was cool, the sky painted in soft colors. For years, I'd imagined what peace might feel like, a house full of family, laughter echoing through the halls. But standing there, with the ocean stretching out in front of me, I realized peace didn't need to be loud. It was in the quiet hum of the waves, the steady sound of my own breathing, and the calm that came from knowing I had finally stopped chasing after people who didn't want to be caught. I turned back toward my little cottage, the lights glowing warmly in the windows. My life wasn't big anymore, but it was mine, every inch of it, and that, I decided, was enough. Because in the end, peace isn't about getting everything back. It's about choosing what you keep. When I first moved to Santa Barbara, I thought distance would erase the ache. But the truth is, distance doesn't heal everything. Understanding does. Time just gives you enough space to look at your choices without flinching. Now, almost a year later, I spend most mornings sitting on the little porch outside my cottage, watching the Pacific stretch out like it has no end. The ocean has a way of making you honest with yourself. It doesn't care about who's right or wrong. It just keeps moving. And I think that's what life does too. Some mornings I replay it all. The phone call, the wedding I never went to, the papers I signed, and the silence that followed. I still don't know if I did the right thing. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I didn't go far enough. But for the first time in my life, the decision was mine, and that has to count for something. I've learned a few things in this chapter of my life. Love isn't about endless forgiveness. It's about mutual respect. It's about saying, "I love you, but I won't let you keep hurting me." There's a difference between being kind and being a doormat. It took me 68 years to learn the difference. When you spend decades giving, it becomes a habit. You give your time, your money, your understanding, and you start believing that's what love is. But love without boundaries turns into obligation. And obligation, no matter how well-intentioned, will drain you dry. Sometimes people don't mean to hurt you. They just get comfortable with how much you'll take. Kenneth and Anita didn't wake up one day and decide to exclude me out of cruelty. They just didn't think about me. And that, in some ways, hurt even more. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending it never happened. Now, I know forgiveness just means I'm done carrying the weight. I forgave them, not because they asked me to, but because I needed to move on. The holidays came and went. I didn't see Kenneth or the baby, though I got another card, this one with a short note from Anita. It said, "Hope you're doing well, Bonnie. The baby's growing fast." No pictures this time. I read it, smiled, and placed it in the drawer with the first one. I'm not angry anymore. I just know my part in their story is smaller now, and that's okay. Sometimes I walk by the water and think about all the women I've met through the nonprofit, young, bright, and trying to build their independence before the world tells them who they should be. I tell them what I wish someone had told me years ago. It's okay to draw the line. It's not cruelty. It's clarity. If you're listening to me right now and you've ever been left out, pushed aside, or made to feel like you were only useful when someone needed you, I want you to hear this clearly. Your worth isn't tied to anyone's appreciation. It never was. Family is supposed to be built on love, but sometimes you have to rebuild it with boundaries. Because when someone rewrites your place in their story, maybe it's time to start your own. I still think about that condo sometimes. Selling it felt harsh. It ended a chapter that could have been fixed, maybe even healed. But if I hadn't done it, I think they would have kept seeing me as an endless resource instead of a person. I don't regret reminding them that I mattered too. When Kenneth's first text came after everything was finalized, "I can't believe you did this," I realized something important. He was shocked because for the first time, I wasn't the one sacrificing. I had broken the pattern. That's what real change looks like. It's never clean and it's never easy, but it's necessary. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe one day he'll visit. Maybe I'll meet that little boy from the picture and we'll start again. Or maybe not. But I've stopped trying to script life. I'm just living it now, one calm day at a time. I used to think strength meant holding everything together. Now I know strength sometimes means letting go of resentment, of control, of waiting for the apology that might never come. If you're a mother listening to me, you probably understand what it feels like to love so deeply that you lose yourself in it. We come from a generation that was taught to keep the peace, to forgive first, to never make a fuss. But sometimes peace comes after the storm, not before it. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you heartless. It makes you whole. So here I am, older, quieter, and finally at peace. The waves outside keep rolling in, and I find comfort in that rhythm. Life doesn't stop because things fall apart. It just reshapes itself around what's left. I've stopped needing to be right. I just need to be honest with myself and with the life I have now. And that's why I wanted to share my story with you. Not for pity, not for praise, but so that someone out there who's sitting in a quiet kitchen, wondering if it's too late to choose herself, knows that it's not. If I could go back, I'd still sell that condo. Not out of revenge, but as a reminder that my time, my love, and my sacrifices have value. I'll leave you with this thought. Was I wrong to sell that condo without warning? Or was it the only way to make them understand I mattered too? Would you have given your child another chance? Or done what I did? Tell me what you think. I'm listening. And if this story spoke to you, please take a moment to like, share, and leave a comment below. I read them all. And every story shared helps another woman realize she's not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of love, loss, and redemption. Don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before, right here on Her Kindle Stories.